Hi, this is Matt Baker. A few weeks ago, I did a video on the complete family tree of the Bible using our new biblical family tree poster. I didn't talk about whether or not the characters were historical. I simply went through the tree as it is described by the Bible. Now, while this video was generally very well received, I did get several comments like this. Fun fact, this is based on completely made up fiction. Amazing chart of fiction. All fiction. This has nothing to do with history. Well, here's the thing. The Bible is neither fiction nor is it nonfiction. Those categories simply didn't exist back then. When ancient people wrote, they often mixed stories designed to make a point, with certain details based in reality. And on top of this, it's important to remember that the Bible was written by many authors in several different genres over a long period of time. So it's ridiculous to try and use one word, such as fiction, to describe the whole thing. And it's even more ridiculous to say that the Bible has nothing to do with history. There are actually plenty of historical characters mentioned in the Bible. So what I thought I'd do in this video is show you 37 Bible characters that are absolutely 100% not fictional. In every case, these are individuals whose names have been found in the archaeological record. In other words, outside of the Bible. Basically, ancient history can be divided into three main periods: the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and Classical Antiquity. The Bronze Age goes from around 3300 to 1200 BCE. So in terms of the Bible story, this covers everything from shortly after Adam and Eve to the time of Moses and Joshua. The Iron Age then goes from around 1200 BCE to 500 BCE. So that covers everything from the period of the Judges to the destruction of the kingdom of Judah by the Babylonians. Finally, everything from 500 BCE onwards is what we call Classical Antiquity. So that's the rest of the chart. In this video, we're only talking about the Hebrew Bible, or what Christians call the Old Testament. So really, only the Bronze Age and the Iron Age are of interest to us. This is because almost all of the stories found in the Hebrew Bible occur during these two periods. In contrast, everything from the Apocrypha and the New Testament occurs during Classical Antiquity. I'll perhaps look at characters from those sections of the Bible in a future video. Let me now use this chart to highlight the 37 Bible characters that have been found in the archaeological record. What do you notice? Almost all of them are from the Iron Age. There's a few from the beginning of Classical Antiquity, but there are zero, I repeat, zero from the Bronze Age. This is a very important point that for some reason doesn't get the attention that it deserves, but it's absolutely crucial for understanding the Bible. You see, the Hebrew Bible is basically an Iron Age book. So it should come as no surprise that the Iron Age parts of the Bible are full of characters whose names can be found in the archaeological record, whereas the Bronze Age parts are not. Ironically, at some point, it became popular in certain atheist circles to state that the Bible was written by a bunch of Bronze Age goat herders, which is ridiculous because the Bible was actually written by a bunch of Iron Age city dwellers. Sure, those Iron Age city dwellers wrote that their ancestors were Bronze Age shepherds, but the people doing the actual writing were from the Iron Age. Now, lest you think that the difference between the Bronze Age and the Iron Age is no big deal, let me drive home how important the distinction is. During the Bronze Age, the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea saw the rise of many great civilizations, such as the Egyptians, Hittites, and Greeks. But then, around the year 1200 BCE, something strange happened. Archaeologists refer to it as the Bronze Age collapse because rather suddenly the Egyptians, Hittites, and Greeks all went into decline. What followed was an approximately 250-year-long period known as the Greek Dark Ages. What exactly caused the collapse is debated. It may have been a volcano that caused ash to fill the sky, leading to drought. Or it could have been a pandemic, or a major war, or migrations, or a combination of all these things. But the fact is that the event caused a clear line to be drawn in the sand, between the before times and the after times. By the time that the Iron Age people started to once again record things, their memory of the before times was blurry, which is why the ancient Greek accounts of what happened during the Bronze Age, such as the stories found in the Iliad and Odyssey, are very different from the ancient Greek accounts of what happened during the Iron Age, such as the histories written by Herodotus. Well, the same is true of the Bible. Everything from the Bronze Age, like the Flood, the Patriarchs, and the Exodus, read more like myth and legend, whereas everything from the Iron Age, like the various kings of Israel and Judah, reads more like history. Now, in this video, I'm not going to go through why I think that the Bronze Age parts of the Bible should be understood as being more literary than literal. Instead, I'm going to focus on the 37 characters from the Iron Age parts that have been demonstrated by archaeology to have been real, because I very specifically want to debunk the idea that the Bible is completely fictional. Let's start with Omri. The Bible barely mentions him, beyond the fact that he became king of Israel and founded the city of Samaria. But he's extremely important for this discussion because he's the earliest Israelite person for whom we have an extra biblical record for that dates close to when he lived. According to the Moabite Meshi stele, discovered in 1868 and now located at the Louvre, Omri was in fact a real person. It describes how Omri and the Israelites conquered the nearby Moabites, but then how, following Omri's death, Mesha, the king of Moab, managed to drive the Israelites out and restore independence. So I'm going to place a verification checkmark next to Omri to indicate that his name has been found in the archaeological record. According to the Bible, the next Israelite king after Omri was his son Ahab. The Bible has a lot more to say about Ahab, who was married to Jezebel and who reigned during the time of Elijah the prophet. However, Ahab is also mentioned outside of the Bible. According to the Assyrian Kirk stele, discovered in 1861 and now located in the British Museum, Ahab the Israelite was one of the 11 kings who allied together to fight the Assyrians in the year 853 BCE. That same stele also mentions Ben-Hadad II, the king of Aram Damascus in Syria, who also appears in the Bible as a sometimes enemy, sometimes ally of Ahab. According to the Bible, Ahab was eventually followed by his son Jehoram, whereas Ben-Hadad II was followed by a usurper named Hazael. Once again, the archaeological record confirms this as being true. Hazael's name has been found on at least 2 objects that date to this period. In fact, this ivory carving may even depict his likeness, and he was almost certainly the king who commissioned the Tel Dan stele, discovered in 1993 and now located at the Israel Museum. The Tel Dan stele is now in pieces, but one piece describes how the king of Aram Damascus defeated both Jehoram, the king of Israel, and Ahaziah from the house of David. This is important for 2 reasons. The first is that the Bible also describes the exact same event, and the second is that this is the earliest mention of the house of David, which ruled in the southern kingdom of Judah. However, please note that the Tel Dan stele does not reference King David specifically. Rather, it simply references the house of David, Ahaziah being a member of that house and a descendant of David who reigned approximately 130 years after his death. So again, take note, the Tel Dan stele is not a contemporary record of David, nor does it give us any information about any events that occurred during David's lifetime. That said, if there was in fact a house of David, we can presumably assume that there was at least somebody named David who founded that house. But since the Tel Dan stele was not made close to David's lifetime, I'm going to have to give David a question mark, not a check. We now come to Jehu, who ruled Israel following Hazael's defeat of Jehoram. Jehu is important because not only is his name found in the archaeological record, his image is as well. So if we go by the criteria, pics or it didn't happen, In this case, we do actually have pics. On the black obelisk of Shalmaneser III, discovered in 1846 and now located in the British Museum, Jehu is actually shown bowing down to Shalmaneser III. There, the Assyrians labeled him as Jehu from the house of Omri. According to the Bible, Hazael of Aram Damascus was followed by his son Ben-Hadad, who became Ben-Hadad III. This too has been confirmed by archaeology on the Zakar stele. Several of the subsequent kings of Israel show up in Assyrian records as well, including Jehoash, whose name appears on the Assyrian Tel al-Rima stele as Jehoash the Sumerian, Jeroboam II, whose name appears on a seal belonging to someone called Shema, the servant of Jeroboam, and Menahem, Pekah, and Hoshea, all of whom appear in Assyrian records as having paid tribute to Tiglath-Pileser III. Also mentioned in Tiglath-Pileser's tributary records is Rezin, the final king of Aram Damascus, who shows up in the Bible in both 2 Kings and Isaiah. Now, Tiglath-Pileser himself also appears in the Bible. In fact, he's the earliest Assyrian king to be mentioned. In 2 Kings, he's called Pul, which is short for Pileser, but in 1 Chronicles, his full name is used, Tiglath-Pileser. And we have loads of archaeological evidence for him, including many depictions, such as this one shown here. Also mentioned in the Bible are the next two Assyrian kings, Tiglath-Pileser's sons, Shalmaneser V and Sargon II. They helped to destroy Samaria and bring about the end of the kingdom of Israel. Sargon II's son Sennacherib thus turned his attention to the kingdom of Judah. So let's now go over there and take a look. After Ahaziah, who was mentioned on the Tel Dan stele, the next two kings of Judah to appear in the archaeological record are Jotham and Ahaz. Their names appear together on a seal discovered in 1995, which reads, "Belonging to Ahaz, son of Jehoram, king of Judah." Which brings us to Hezekiah, one of the most important kings of Judah. According to the Bible, Jerusalem was able to hold off the Assyrians during Hezekiah's reign, allowing Judah to survive when Israel did not. This is confirmed on the Taylor Prism, discovered in 1830 and now located at the Israel Museum. It records the annals of Sennacherib, which describe the situation like this. As for Hezekiah the Jew, he did not submit to my yoke. I laid siege to 46 of his strong cities and conquered them. Himself I made a prisoner in Jerusalem, his royal residence, like a bird in a cage. Hezekiah's name was also found on a seal that includes a depiction of the sun with downward-facing wings, which was presumably Hezekiah's royal seal, because it says, "Belonging to Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah." It was found in Jerusalem in 2015, and just a few years later, at the same site, another seal was found, this time reading, "Belonging to Isaiah the Navi." Now this one is controversial because Navi is the Hebrew word for prophet, but it was also at the time simply a common name. So it's possible that this is evidence for the existence of Isaiah the prophet, who, after all, did live at the exact same time as Hezekiah and was a member of the royal family. However, it also could just refer to some guy named Isaiah Navi. So once again, I'm going to use a question mark. Hezekiah's son Manasseh, however, does get a check mark. He's mentioned on the prism of Esarhaddon as having given tribute to Assyria. Esarhaddon is, of course, mentioned on the prism too, as well as in the Bible. So that's yet another check mark. The Bible even gets a little detail right about the transfer of power between Sennacherib and Esarhaddon. It says that one of Esarhaddon's brothers, named Adramelech, murdered their father Sennacherib. This fact is recorded in several contemporary sources, so that's yet another historical person mentioned in the Bible, and another historical event that the Bible gets correct. The final Assyrian king to be mentioned in the Bible is Ashurbanipal. After his reign, the Assyrians actually declined in power, which was of great benefit to Judah because it allowed Judah to really thrive. This occurred during the reign of Josiah, which is when the initial version of the biblical Book of Kings was likely written. Unfortunately, we do not have any archaeological evidence for Josiah, but we do have evidence for the high priest who served under him, Hilkiah. In 1980, archaeologists found a signet ring which reads, belonging to Hanan, the son of Hilkiah the priest. Because the ring was able to be dated to the time of Josiah, and because the word priest appears on it, this is almost certainly evidence that the Hilkiah of the Bible was indeed a real person. Now, up to this point, I haven't mentioned any Egyptian pharaohs. That's because I've already done an entire video on the pharaohs mentioned in the Bible, which I'll link to in the description. But let me quickly summarize. There are exactly 5 pharaohs mentioned by name in the Bible. And no, the Pharaoh of the Exodus isn't one of them. The Bible simply refers to him as Pharaoh, which actually makes sense because, like I said earlier, the Exodus took place during the Bronze Age, and therefore it was a distant memory by the time of the Iron Age. However, the Bible does mention Shoshank, who it calls Shishak, who reigned during the time of Rehoboam and Jeroboam. It also mentions Osorkon IV, who it calls King So, and Taharka, who it calls Tirhaka. These 2 pharaohs reigned around the time of Hezekiah. Next, there's Pharaoh Necho II, who according to the Bible was responsible for killing King Josiah. Finally, there's Necho's grandson, Hophra, who reigned around the time that Judah fell to Babylon. Which brings me to the most famous foreign ruler mentioned in the Bible, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. His name, of course, appears in the book of Daniel, but it also shows up in 2 Kings and Jeremiah. And we have several archaeological artifacts that provide evidence for his existence, such as the inscription plaque found on the famous Ishtar Gate, which Nebuchadnezzar had built in Babylon, but which is now located in Berlin, as well as the Babylonian Chronicles, recorded on a series of clay tablets. Babylonian records from the time of Nebuchadnezzar also mention Jeconiah, king of the Jews, who was held prisoner in Babylon and given rations. According to the Bible, Jeconiah was held prisoner for 37 years and was only released by Amel-Marduk, who succeeded his father as king of Babylon. In the Bible, Amel-Marduk is called Evil-Marduk, although note that this has nothing to do with the English word evil. Evil was simply an alternative way to write Amel. Again, the succession described in the Bible matches the succession described in Babylonian records, because Amel-Marduk was in fact the next Babylonian king after Nebuchadnezzar. Now, the next Babylonian king to show up in the Bible is Belshazzar. The Bible refers to him as a son of Nebuchadnezzar, but according to extra-biblical sources, he was more likely his great-grandson. In fact, Belshazzar was probably not even the senior king. According to Babylonian sources, he was simply the crown prince, who ruled alongside his father Nabonidus. But one thing that both the Bible and other sources agree on is that it was during Belshazzar's rule, or co-rule, that Babylon fell to the Achaemenid Persians. And the leader of the Achaemenid Persians who conquered Babylon was Cyrus the Great. The book of Isaiah actually refers to him as the Messiah, because it was Cyrus who decreed that the Jews could return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. The book of Ezra describes Cyrus's decree like this: "Any of the Lord's people among you may go up to Jerusalem in Judah and build the temple of the Lord, the God of Israel, the God who is in Jerusalem, and may their God be with them." In 1879, archaeologists found the Cyrus cylinder, originally located in Babylon, but now housed in the British Museum. It describes Cyrus's decree like this: "To the other side of the Tigris River, where many sanctuaries had been abandoned for a long time, I returned their gods to their places, and I let them dwell in eternal abodes. And I gathered all their inhabitants and returned them to their dwellings." So this is a very good example of how the Bible is definitely not all fiction. The Bible records this very important historical event that occurred right around the transition between the Iron Age and Classical Antiquity. From this point forward, we no longer have to rely entirely on archaeological finds to learn about the past. Because, starting with the Persian period, ancient people started recording history in a different way, a more straightforward way, with less embellishments and more details. The best example of this is the Greek writer Herodotus, who is called the father of history, and who lived right around this time. Herodotus was born shortly after the reign of Darius I, and he died during the reign of Artaxerxes I. These two Persian kings are mentioned both in the Bible and in the works of Herodotus. So that brings our total up to 37 Bible characters who were real historical people. And that's just the Old Testament, or Hebrew Bible. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a similar video about the New Testament. And don't forget to check out Dante Labs by clicking the link in the description or pinned comment. Thanks for watching.